Welcome to another episode of Criminal Justice Podcast. I am Jacqueline Polverari. I'm the founder of Evolution Reentry Services in Brantford. And we would like to introduce and welcome today very special guest, Amy Ralston. Did I say that? Amy Ralston Povah, right? That is right.
Ralston Povah.
Ralston Povah.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Polverari. It's a tongue twister. But she is the founder and president of Can Do Foundation. And I will let her explain that. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I really appreciate you having me on your show. Okay, so the Can Do Foundation is an acronym for Clemency for All Nonviolent Drug Offenders, Can Do. And I came up with it while I was still in prison. I was moved by all the stories of the other women that I was serving time with, in particular, my roommate, who was Asian. Her name was Lao Chin Chin. And I looked through her PSI. That was back when we could access our...
And for our listeners, the PSI is, because most of the people that listen don't,
pre-sentence investigation. It's also a PSR, which is pre-sentence report. And it's what the judge uses at sentencing. It's literally boiled the trial down to a few pages. And when you read your PSI, at least in my case, and so many other people I think would agree, sometimes you read it and you go, who is this person? I don't even recognize.
Yeah, that was mine too.
I'm like, really? Because it's not exactly taken from transcripts. It's the government's version, and a probation officer writes it up. And really the only thing you get to add is your schooling and whether or not you had a good home environment. And then somehow these numbers are calculated where a judge just goes to a chart and then sentences you based on, okay, she's a first offender, and all the drugs in the case puts her at a level 38. They tried to pump me up to a level for life.
Yeah, but people don't understand that. You know, it's all numbers, 13. Oh, she's a good, she said she did it. I'll bring her down to 12. Oh, wait, she bounced a check once. She's back up to 14.
Right. It's a calculation. And the judge will sit there and say, my hands are tied. So you can't take into consideration any mitigating factors or really anything other than this pre-sentence report. So when I read my roommate's pre-sentence report, there was nothing in there negative about her. It was staggering.
What year was this?
Oh, let me see. So this was in the 90s. It was somewhere around 98, 99. I was seeking clemency at that time and was making some progress, in great part due to the fact that David France was a journalist for Glamour magazine for a very short period of his career. He doesn't even put it in his resume anymore because he went on to become an Oscar-nominated documentarian and also, I think, editor-in-chief of U.S. News and World Report or one of those magazines.
Right.
And Glamour had hired him to write some sort of hard-hitting pieces, some serious pieces, instead of pieces about how to find a man and whatever.
Dress appropriately for that first date. Right. Yeah.
How to impress your date's mother or about orgasms or whatever. Anyway, so he reached out to me. I think I was the first article he wrote for Glamour, and he Googled drug cases because he'd seen something on PBS Frontline. It was about sort of the underbelly of the drug war, and was intrigued. And he came across, my name popped up on the internet. And so anyway, he wrote about my case. He wanted an exclusive. And I told him, I really, really only want to do it if you will focus on the conspiracy law, because up until then, everything was being blamed on mandatory minimums.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I didn't get a mandatory minimum. I did get, and this is confusing for listeners, I got mandatory sentencing based on the chart, but a mandatory minimum is something a little bit more specific. To this day, I can't really even explain it, but
conspiracy back then, did it have mandatory minimums for conspiracy?
Well, conspiracy is the first thing that happens to you because most of the women, including myself, it would be difficult to indict us at all if not for the conspiracy law, because it's a net where if you were associated with, if you gave somebody a car ride, if you spent money, if you did this least little thing, you're guilty by association. Correct. And so you can indict a girlfriend, wife, mother, grandmother, aunt, if someone's just living in your home and involved in the drug trade.
Right.
And so I took the position, I was constantly trying to take the position that we really need to focus on the conspiracy laws, because that's the first thing that hooks us. And the mandatory sentencing and mandatory minimums is the last thing that is used to cause you to receive these crazy 20 years to life sentences.
It was insane.
But they're weaponized. They're weaponized on the front end, as they were with me, where the federal agents told me, you're looking at 20 to life if you don't cooperate. That's what was told.
And most women get that if they don't cooperate.
Right. But to go back to when I was in prison with my roommate, I looked at her pre-sentence report, and the only thing they had on her was that she had passed on a message to her boyfriend from what she did not know was a confidential informant. And really all the confidential informant said was, tell your boyfriend to meet me in Chicago at this hotel at this time. And her boyfriend didn't speak English. She passed on that information. And really that's the only thing that they accused her of. And this was at the beginning of the resurrection of the drug war under the Reagan-Bush administration, when it was put on steroids. A lot of people say the drug war is Nixon's drug war, but first offenders were not receiving 20 to life, and the conspiracy law was not being used as a weapon like it was in the late 80s. Right. So I said, let me write your clemency petition, because I was making progress in great part due to the Glamour magazine article that David France wrote, where he explained how women were getting sucked up in these conspiracy nets. And a lot of women were serving time for what their significant other had done, or people they didn't even know in the conspiracy, because you're held responsible for everything that happened in the conspiracy.
And most of these women, I'm sorry, of these women are all young women.
Right. Well, because when the feds first busted into my home, I was 28 and had only been married 3 years. And so because of the man I married, and being with him for a very short period of time, I was held responsible for, things that I was not even aware of, but that's another story. Yeah. So I filled out her clemency petition, and 2 senators from Arkansas had already been advised of my case. And one of them was from my little bitty hometown of Charleston, Arkansas, Senator Dale Bumpers. And Senator Bumpers was sort of a mentor for President Clinton, for Bill Clinton, as he was coming up the ranks in Arkansas.
Right.
And then became governor, and then went on to become president. So Senator Bumpers and President Clinton were very close friends. And my parents had asked Senator Bumpers to please intervene at the beginning of the Clinton administration. And at first he was like, I mean, my parents used to play bridge with them. There's
wow.
2,000 people in Charleston, and it's a very close-knit community. So he said, my mother's name was Nancy. He said, Nancy, I can't get involved. I voted for these laws, these mandatory minimums, and I'm really sorry what's happened to Amy. But he didn't know, and so many politicians didn't know how the laws that they passed were actually being used by prosecutors in an inappropriate way, and eventually wrote a letter stating that. So after I lost my appeal, my 2255, which is a habeas corpus appeal, it's sort of your last appeal for those who don't know, my parents went back, and to make a long story short, right about that time, the Glamour magazine article came out, because nobody's going to go looking through your transcripts trying to understand, how did she get 24 years? She must have done something. Everyone was saying that. Even friends of mine were like, well, there's more to the story.
Oh, yeah. People don't understand. They don't understand at all.
No, it's just, especially back then in the 90s. There just wasn't very much information about stories like mine. So when the Glamour magazine article came out, it was a big deal. It exposed how I and others were literally serving time for merely going to trial. If you go to trial and exercise your Sixth Amendment right, you are subject to the mandatory sentencing, which people who cooperate can escape. I mean, there's some great incentives for people to cooperate, because then they're not sentenced in the same way that people
it's a trickle-down effect. And then they get somebody and they're all convictions. And then election time comes, and look at how great I'm doing in convicting all these horrible people. Right? I know.
Scourge. Back during the Bush senior administration, we were referred to as a scourge. We were
scourge
society. And so anyway, I came up with the CAN-DO acronym while in prison, thinking, when I get out, if I get out, I really want to try to help other people with this process. And the two senators in Arkansas, Senator Bumpers and Senator Pryor, once they read the Glamour magazine article, they were outraged that the so-called kingpin, for lack of a better term, and for your viewers, I married a Stanford Law School graduate. He owned numerous businesses, but he got involved with MDMA when it was legal. And don't want to go too much into my story because it's a very long, convoluted story, but I knew he had access to MDMA. I just wasn't aware of the fact that he was setting up to manufacture it. He shielded some of that information from me, but I'm not trying to play the I'm innocent card. A lot of people get confused when you say you didn't know everything, that you're taking a position that you were completely innocent. I'm not taking that position. If I had known everything, I still wouldn't have wanted to cooperate. I don't know that I would have been adverse, because I've tried MDMA and it has some beneficial properties. Well,
right now it's in the FDA and they're doing studies on it and research that it's beneficial for mental health things such as PTSD, which in our case, but they are doing
that. Yeah, they're making a lot of progress.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not trying to minimize what I did, but as an educational tool, I separated from my husband. He was a womanizer and an alcoholic. And I was very young when I met him. I was 24. And I just knew that he was just amazing. I had never met anyone like him. And I really thought love conquers all. And we'll work through some of these issues. And about 3 years later, I literally had to move to LA because he was very manipulative. And anytime I left him, he would beg. He would just beg me to come back, and I'll change. I'll quit drinking. I'll get therapy. I can't live without you. And for a young woman that hasn't had the wisdom of life and nor had any experiences, again, the little hometown I grew up in, very few people got divorced. My parents, it was never, and God rest their souls. I've lost them.
Same with my family. Right.
It just wasn't something that I was exposed to that much, and how to cope and deal with a manipulative person. Yeah. So I moved to Los Angeles, and a year later, he was arrested in Germany. So call me stupid, naive, whatever. I still cared about him. I still cared deeply. Yeah. And he was constantly trying to get a reconciliation. He would even come to Los Angeles. And
wait, this is before prison or?
Before, yeah. Because this is okay. That I went to prison behind.
Okay.
And so I threw caution to the wind and went to Dallas, where he lived. And his attorney over in Germany that had been assigned to him asked me to get some money. And anyway, this is going to get way too convoluted. But long story short, yes. I went to go visit him in Germany, and he wanted me to go around and collect money. And he thought he would get bail. Well, if you're a foreigner in Germany, you don't get bail. But I have letters between us where his attorney was leading him to believe, and he thought he would get bail. But it was going to be a very large number. And I did go find money that was hidden in safety deposit boxes. That wasn't banks, but again, there's too many background details.
Right.
I met with somebody who owed him money, and the money was not kosher. It was drug related. I remember I did it one time, and it was so creepy and weird to me when I met with this person at a motel. I'll never forget walking out of there and thinking, I knew I was doing something wrong, and I wondered if the feds were going to just move in on me. And right. I was so nervous, and I was shaking, and I got in the car, and I told myself, I'm never doing this again. This is just too creepy for me.
I didn't know any of this background of your story. This fascinating background of your story. I've never heard this.
Well, I've shared it almost to the point where, you get tired of hearing it yourself, because it seems like, when you're in prison, everyone sits around on their prison bunk, and then people come year after year and say, "What are you in for?" And I'll never forget one time just being like, I can't share this story one more time. It's just too, but it is germane and relevant in the context of women who are serving time because of the actions of their significant other. To wrap this part of the story up, my husband back then, my first husband, he cut a deal, and oh my God, talk about a sweetheart deal. He only served 4 years in Germany, but the press has always made it sound like he served 4 years and I got 24.
Wait, yeah. So he was selling it.
Yeah, he was
knew about it.
I didn't know he was. I did not know about.
No, you just got money for him like that, right? And you end up with 24 years, and he only ended up with 4 years.
Yeah,
something's wrong with that picture.
Well, the basis of my sentence is that they could show that he had produced over 3 million tablets of MDMA.
Right.
So I was held responsible for all the MDMA that he had produced. But here's the kicker. What happened in Germany is completely unrelated from a legal standpoint to what happened in the United States, because none of the MDMA, and I didn't even know what the heck was going on. We were already separated, and I was living in Los Angeles when apparently he decided to start manufacturing MDMA in Europe. And so none of the MDMA from Europe ever came into the US. So it's two separate cases. The United States case was from MDMA that he had manufactured in Guatemala and came to. So on the indictment that we shared, he served his time in Germany, came back to the US, and the judge that sentenced me to 24 years gave him 3 years probation for cooperating. So he only got 3 years probation, and he was still apparently working with the feds to help them with money that was being, it's all about money. And I guess he had money in Zurich and Germany and France, and the US were all fighting over it. And I think he was working with the feds in some capacity. So he got a sweetheart deal. And as so many women that I met in prison, I received the longest sentence of anybody in the entire conspiracy. I think there was 15 of us that were indicted in the same indictment. And I met so many women who were the only person still serving time. Women often go to trial because they had minimal knowledge. So the feds, a lot of the time, aren't even really interested in cutting a deal with them because
they don't know.
They don't have that much information. And women, I believe, are just more loyal. Women don't want to, testify against a loved one. And so often, as in my case and others, the person that you have an emotional cord to is telling you what to do.
Yeah.
They're even sometimes hiring your attorney. That's a conflict of interest. So back to the women's issue and my roommate, after I got out and I received clemency, which it hits you like you don't get a heads up. It's just loudspeaker, go to the case manager's office. I thought I was in trouble, because anytime you come over the loudspeaker, it's either you got to do a UA, which is an analysis test, or a loved one at home has died, or your room has been, they shake it down and they find something in your
nail polish, or it's so dangerous, right?
And so I'm like, and a lot of people in the compound said they've been calling you for an hour, because I was in recreation and recreation didn't have the intercom system in there. And so I was shaking. I got to the unit and the door was locked. There's controlled movement in prison. You got to get from point A to point B within 10 minutes and then get, locked in, or you're in trouble for being out of bounds. So I'm knocking on the door and they let me in, and I go to my case manager's office, who was the person calling me over the loudspeaker. And she was in a state of distress and didn't really say what was going on at first. She said, "Where are you releasing to?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Where are you going to live?" And I said, "Well, I thought you were just going through my file because they update your file." And I said, "Well, with my parents, because I don't have a place to live." That's,
right. Yeah.
Been in prison. Didn't own a home.
That's common sense.
Right. And she had papers on her desk, and she really wasn't looking at me. She was, going through my file. And so I asked her what's going on. And it seems like it took one or two questions before she just turned to me and she said, "You're going home and I have to have you out of here by 5:00."
Oh yeah. Because now you got to get kicked out.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? And she said, "I need you to focus with me. I have to book you on an airlines. I have to set up probation for you. I have to get all of this done." And clemency was unheard of back then. It's not like now it's almost a household word.
And only the president in the United States could do that for you.
Right. Because we're federal. We're not state. And so I did know that the senators in Arkansas were making progress. And I knew that they had met with President Clinton when he was in Little Rock for an occasion. And, we were getting a little bit of positive news, but we were also getting some iffy news that they had talked to him, but that he didn't really, show much interest. He said, "Okay, I'll look into it," but they weren't, we were far from the finish line.
Right.
So anyway, I remember her telling me to sit down and I tried, but I kept jumping out of my chair like a jack in the box.
Oh, God.
Because how do you process thinking you've got a 24-year sentence? I still had 12 years to go or whatever. And you're suddenly told that you're going home, like you're walking out that day. And I was like a baby bird.
Oh my God, I'm getting chills.
I just kept going.
It's a dream. This is a dream. I got to wake up because there's no way in hell I'm going home.
Right. And then I would jump out of my chair and I said, "Can I call somebody? I need to call somebody." "No, I need to get this paperwork done." So I would try to sit down and I was just like, oh my God.
So your parents did not know?
Nobody knew. And I had somebody who was in San Francisco who was visiting me for a visit. We could have visits Thursday through Sunday. And I wanted to call him because back then, I know there were cell phones, but I don't know that I can't remember whether he even had a cell phone. I don't know. Well, all I knew was that I wanted to get a hold of him so he would be able to come pick me up, because I had to have somebody come physically pick me up at the prison location. So finally, she said, "Go over to this other office and tell them to let you make a phone call." And so I was able to do that, but I came back and she had to finish the paperwork. And I'll never forget, because when I walked out of her office, I was walking through a lobby. This facility is not the mental image that maybe some of your listeners would imagine is associated with the prison. It was originally built for troubled youth, boys. And it's an A-frame type building with a huge lobby, common area, and no bars, no cells like that. We had wooden doors with a window to look into. And I just remember that I had to run to my room because she said, "You have to pack up everything and you have to go over to what's R&D, receiving and something." Yeah. And so I was going to my room and I just hollered, "Yahoo!" It's kind of like Yahoo Mountain Dew type thing. And everyone started coming to their doors. A lot of people work at Unicorn and weren't there. But for the women who were in their rooms, the doors started opening to see what the commotion was.
Because you had been in prison for how long at this point?
9 years and 3 months. And now I'm trying to help women like Michelle West and Laz Ordaz and so many women who have served 20 and, like with Michelle, almost 30 years. So I almost sound like a whiny baby over my 9 years and 3 months.
No, you don't.
I was literally on my last nerve because I'd had a few things happen to me at that time. For you may, and other people who've been in prison, formerly incarcerated people, if you get somebody in your room who's a snorer, loud, like a Mack truck.
I had that.
You go through literally sleep deprivation, and it was so bad. And then she was finally moved out, and another woman was moved in, and she was shooting up heroin, and I didn't know, but I saw some blood on my blanket of my bunk.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where that came from. And somebody else told me that's people who shoot up heroin a lot of the time that'll dribble. And so I literally prayed to God. I said, if you don't get me out of here, I'm just done. And I swear to God, within, it seems like just maybe a week or two, I got this wonderful news. So I got out, and I was determined to get my roommate out. And I had another interview with Glamour because they wanted to do the happy ending story, and came to my parents' house in Arkansas. And so I talked about my roommate, Chen, we called her Chen, and how she was doing 17 and a half years. I don't know that I shared that she got 17 and a half years for merely passing a message on to her boyfriend, because as was written in her report, it said that this seems harsh, but if we're going to achieve our goal with the drug war, it sends a message. And that somehow, if she never sold drugs, she never did anything really she had a job as a manager in when New York used to have a clothing industry, garment industry.
Right.
She worked in and was just her whole life, worked very hard, had 3 children. So the good news is that Lao Chin got out on Clinton's last day. So I thought I had the recipe to success. I was like, okay, if I can get other people media exposure like I got, and I was able to communicate with some of Clinton's staff because of the senators. Her name was Meredith Cabe, and she was one of President Clinton's staff that coordinated Clement, with the Office of the Pardon Attorney. I felt like I could get more women out. I only wanted to focus on women, and for the first, almost 10 years until 2014, I only focused on women.
Okay.
But what I did not expect was that George W. Bush would be elected. And I really assumed Al Gore would win the election. And I'll never forget that night. I was just so depressed because Daddy Bush was really instrumental in resurrecting the drug war and was just such a drug war champion. And I'm like, well, we'll get more of the same. And sure enough, George W. Bush wasn't really interested in clemency. So it was pretty lean and uneventful. And so, but I started, the Can Do Foundation became a nonprofit in 2004. Even though when I got out of prison, I already kind of had the acronym in mind and was working on trying to help women, and created a website and put up their faces and stories, because that's how David France found my story, was on the internet. So I really thought, okay, I know how to do this, but it's never as easy as it seems. And so I did a film because I wanted there to be proof that I somehow was contributing some way to this movement. And I was going to do a documentary on the drug war. Then a documentary came out on Showtime by a guy named Kevin Booth, who I'm now friends with. And he covered most of the things that
you were going to cover.
Yeah, that I was wanting to cover. And so I filmed a bunch of people in law enforcement and already had them, those interviews in the can, as they say. And I decided to do one on marijuana because I thought, marijuana I knew people who were serving time for marijuana. And I thought, I think that will be easier. And I don't want to replicate this other documentary.
Right. It's easier to explain too, I think.
Yeah. So I did 420, the documentary, and started around 2011 and finished it in 2013. It won Best Documentary Feature at the Awareness Film Festival in Santa Monica. And I was shocked because I was up against another documentary where Sharon Stone was the executive producer, called Film. And I almost didn't even go to the award ceremony because I was so exhausted. I literally just finished the documentary in time to be able to submit it. And somebody said, you gotta go. And so I had
you couldn't miss that.
I'm not kidding. Because I had my premiere the night before the award ceremony and had an after party. And so I was so tired. I had no makeup and my hair wasn't done. And I put a hat on and I went to the award ceremony.
Not thinking you were going to win anything.
And when they said 420, the documentary, I was shocked. I was just, what? Because this was a first time effort. I, never ever tried to put my toe in that entertainment industry world. So I finished that. And my point for bringing it up is that in 2014, I received distribution from Gravitas. I'm proud to say I've earned my investment back probably 2 or 3 times. And then President Obama kicked off Clemency Project 2014 right about then. So the timing was perfect because I had finished that film. And when he kicked off Clemency Project 2014, I was the only organization, nonprofit in the nation that focused on clemency.
Right.
In our mission statement.
Not pardons. You specifically.
Well, right. Other organizations got into the clemency business, but they were like, for example, FAM is Families Against Mandatory Minimum. Right. It's not in their mission statement to focus on clemency. Mm-hmm. My mission statement was clemency, and everybody on my website, I was trying to help with clemency. So I was invited to DC to attend the kickoff dinner for Clemency Project 2014 by organizations that were making up the what we now call CP14, Clemency Project 2014 panel for the Obama administration. And while I was there, someone walked up to me and said, "Your case started a war in the pardon office." And I didn't even know who this was. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, who are you?" And he said, "I'm Sam Morrison, and I used to work at the pardon office." Anyway, this is too much of a departure to tell that part of the story, but he told me that I wasn't going anywhere, that a staff attorney had my case, and she actually, according to him, hated me.
Wow.
Because she was a former prosecutor, and she felt like the media exposure that I was getting was making the Department of Justice look bad. Mm-hmm. So he said, she wrote you up for a denial. And he said, even with the Clinton administration, because they had asked for my case, she was determined that I wasn't going anywhere, and they would not send it over to the Clinton administration. Wow. And so I really got the inside story from his perspective. He's on my advisory board now. He went on to become a whistleblower and shared some stuff that was going on at the Office of the Pardon Attorney that was, led to the Roger Adams, who was the pardon attorney when I got clemency. He was accused of malfeasance and had to step down. So I've really been around to understand more and more and more about how this process works. And I started doing vigils in front of the White House, holding up posters.
I have watched all the videos. I needed to know. You impressed me so much. I've seen all the visuals. Oh my God. Your story is just amazing.
Well, I want people to know that we're not just putting you on a website. We communicate directly with prisoners, which is a little bit unique. It's not something that other organizations want to do, maybe because it's cost prohibitive, but I've always wondered why other organizations that are very well funded do not do the one-on-one. And in fact, we've kind of become a clearinghouse for sister organizations who constantly reach out to us and say, do you know any women who were shackled during labor? Do you know anyone in prison who will benefit from the First Step Act, for example?
Everybody.
Yeah. Right. And so it got to the point where I was like, I can like that. I can give you those names, but it took me 10, 15 years of communicating and staying in touch with not only the prisoners, their family members, and knowing their background stories. And after a while, it literally got to the point where I was doing so much free work for other organizations that, frankly, may or may not credit can do.
Right.
That I finally just said, if you want to partner, that's great. Or if there's a way I can be compensated. And I have actually worked as an independent contractor for a few other organizations that were willing to compensate me for being able to plug them in. But one thing I really am a big proponent of is that organizations, if you're going to get funding for advocating for prisoners, you need to communicate with prisoners.
I agree so much on that. In my space, which is kind of ironic, we're in complete opposite. I get women prepared to go to prison and then stay in contact with them. And when they come home, I help them with the emotional piece of reentry, which is another whole thing. And I know so many reentry companies that get so much funding, but I don't quite think they even have a one-on-one therapeutic conversation. And
Jacqueline, so important. That's so important that you bring that up, because something needs to change. And I get phone calls from all the people that I've been in touch with. Sometimes for 10, 12 years, I've communicated with some of these, not just women, but Can-Do also now advocates for men, because when Obama kicked off Clemency Project 2014, there were so many families who wanted us to help their loved one. And I knew several men who were in prison, like Tim Tyler, who was serving life for LSD. And I knew about his case when I was in prison. So we opened those doors, but they all call. I just was on the phone with someone yesterday who is having a horrible time because they come out and they have to live with a family member, not always their mother who loves them most. Yeah. It might be an aunt or whatever. And she had a situation where her nieces, who are teenagers, are very big in, at that age in drama. And so an incident occurred where she was really in jeopardy of being maybe violated and sent back, and she had to get out of that environment.
Right.
And so I am constantly getting phone calls. I'm not a reentry organization, but we really do need the people who are getting lots of funds for reentry. We need for them to step up when these stories come to people like myself and yourself who are not funded, so that they can actually help assist with housing, because I know that there's money in reentry and I don't know where it goes.
And you know what frustrates me, Amy? I spoke with a girl the other day who was getting out of prison after 9 years, and she needed help with money for transportation from prison to out of state to her parents' house. And her parents had no money at all. And I could not get this woman $100. So I just did it myself. I mean, I just gave it to her because I set up the bus ride. And I thought, this is what reentry is. I don't think people understand that when women and men come home, they can't even make choices for themselves. You're in prison, your identity is taken away. You cannot make any choices. You're re-entering into society and you have, like you said, no home to go to. And you really need even the therapy portion of it. I can't imagine. And this is what my passion is. When they come home, the very same community they need to support them is who they cannot speak to. Felons cannot associate with another felon when they come home. And I run a support group for women for reentry. I can't tell you the women that can get denied to join the support group from their probation officers. And
that has to change.
Yeah, it has to change.
That has to change because what is it they say? 1 in 3 adults now?
Yeah.
That had some kind of, felony in their past or run in some capacity with the law.
Yeah. And while you're on probation,
you don't even know.
No.
You could be, what are you supposed to do? Go around and ask people personal questions? Like you can't do that with your, medical issues. And that definitely has to change. And although I've been pardoned now by President Trump, I'm a felon. And some people, when they got out, really would have to ask their probation officers if it was okay to communicate with me. I really haven't had too much of an issue with that. But what hurts my soul is that precisely what you just talked about. If there weren't people like myself and you that are communicating with the people while they're in prison, so that we're really all they know.
Right.
Michael Peltier is somebody who was serving life for pot, and he was a paraplegic. And I wrote his entire clemency petition and communicated with him for 10 years. And he received clemency from President Trump, but they have stopped in the federal system, not everywhere, because I know where they book an airfare for some people.
Right.
But I was worried, and I fortunately was able to give Michael the good news because we were actually communicating with the Trump administration.
Oh my God, that had to be amazing.
Yeah, right. And I had told him to call me that day because I sort of had a heads up he was going to get it. And I did not want him to have to take a bus because he's in a wheelchair. And I told Michael, I said, Michael, when you get clemency or when you get word from the prison, if they try to book you on a bus, let me know. I will pay for your airfare. I'm not going to have you riding on a bus to get home. And so that's exactly what happened. They said, in fact, he gave one of the Bureau of Prison staffers my phone number as I had instructed him. Mm-hmm. And they were very nice. I was actually surprised. I didn't know whether they'd really call me or not, but they did call.
Well, everyone knows who you are.
Well, I don't know about that, but I didn't know from a technical standpoint or a procedural standpoint, if they could communicate with somebody like me. They're all tied up in their own bureaucratic rules. And so I got a phone call and he said, look, we can't book his airfare. We only do that for people who are going across the pond, was the term he used, meaning like to Europe or whatever. And so I said, I listen, I'll pay for it. So we had to coordinate getting him on a flight. I said, what time can you guys have him at the airport? And he goes, this is going to be really tight. It was very exciting. And it was wonderful news. And I loved the way we worked together. Who would guess? Because a lot of the time, sometimes the staff isn't as amenable to doing things that are helpful to those of us who are in prison. So I was just thrilled that I was in a position where I could book his flight, make sure they were going to have a shuttle take him. But again, the story you just shared with me about the young lady and me being able to put Michael on an airplane to get him to Florida, his brother, I've met his brother and seen Michael since he's been out, and they're just adorable. And it's one of the greatest things in the world when you have an impact on somebody and then you see them thriving at home.
It is.
So anyway, the Can Do Foundation is, still plugging along, but I'd like to talk about, women. And so let
me bring up the story of how I actually talked with you, right? I saw a Facebook post, and we're friends on Facebook. We've never had a conversation together, privately before. And I saw this beautiful picture of you crying or sad. And oh my God. And it said, I'm going to read it because I'm looking at it. I went in at 30 and was released when I was 40. My mom and I spoke to a doc about freezing eggs, and he said it was likely already too late. And it goes on that you had not had children because your childbearing your age was in prison. Mm-hmm. And I had never thought about that side because I work with families. So most of the women that I work with have children, and my daughters stay in touch with their children while they're in prison. So it never dawned on me that, oh my God, and I have kids. What if I had gone in when I was 25 and didn't come home until I was even 35? I wouldn't have my kids.
Exactly.
So for a conspiracy charge, that affected me. That post affected me so much. And
well, let me share how that came about. The Can Do Foundation co-hosted a luncheon at the Four Seasons in Washington, D.C. And the new pardon attorney, Liz Oyer, attended. And the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, President Andrea James, moderated the first panel, which was made up of attorneys, including Ms. Oyer, the pardon attorney, which is a very welcome breath of fresh air, because normally the pardon attorney and the office of the pardon attorney has always been sort of a black hole. Information goes in, but information never comes out. We don't know whether they're even looking at cases. You can't communicate with anyone. You can't get anybody on the phone. You don't even, it's always been a one-way street.
Yeah.
And Liz Oyer was recently appointed as the new pardon attorney, and she has been willing to engage, even introduce herself in Zooms with a lot of the advocacy organizations. So it was amazing to have that opportunity to co-host along with other organizations also co-hosted. Right. And so I was on the third panel, which was formerly incarcerated women, and especially those of us who are now in activism. So it was made up of Cindy Shank, who her brother did a film about her called The Sentence. And I knew her brother when Cindy was in. She was on my website, Rudy Valdez. And I know the pain he went through filming her children as they were growing up without a mom. I was on the panel Danielle Metz was on the panel, and I served time with Danielle, and I love her dearly. She was serving triple life for things that her husband and other people did. And she was just not, she was maybe aware, but she just was not, she never deserved life, much less triple life. And then Kimba Smith. And Kimba has just been an amazing advocate she got out about 6 months after I did, December of 2000. I got out on July 7th of 2000 due to Clinton. And so the four of us were on a panel, and Andrea James asked me about the fact that I had had no children, and wanted me to share my personal experience with regard to a woman now in my 60s who missed out on motherhood. And it's my response was kind of spontaneous because I hadn't really thought about this aspect until I started sharing with.
See, I'm gonna. This is a very passionate subject of mine: children and mothers.
So I said, well, when I was in prison, I used to listen to the phone calls of mothers talking to their children. I literally had a phone that had been placed not too far outside my cell room.
Right.
And it wasn't enclosed. So, and in there, it's kind of like a echo chamber. And so I sometimes literally had to leave my room because I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand the, one woman in particular kept talking to her son and saying, if you don't stop getting in trouble at school, she was trying to explain Child Protective Services.
Right.
His grandmother was taking care of him. And, she was trying to nicely explain to him that, something worse than his mother being ripped from him was going to happen. And just listening to that, and then also other conversations about, happy birthday. Some mothers weren't willing to tell their children that they were in prison. They were concealing it and saying that they were on a long trip.
I remember that too.
So I shared that I went to family day, when there's a family day in prison where the kids can come in and spend the day with their mothers. And I remembered the first time I saw that, I just remember thinking, oh my God, I'm so lucky that I'm not going through this too. And seeing at the end of visitation, children, babies crying their eyes out. Some of them are too young to understand why their mother won't come home with them. And I've described this numerous times, how it is a scream that you cannot delete from your brain. It's not like a child who's not getting a cookie before dinner. It's a different kind of blood-curdling scream of, being ripped from your mother again. And I just remember thinking, I don't know how I could survive this. And a friend of mine actually did try to commit suicide in prison because she had a 2-year-old daughter. And anyway.
Well, you thought you weren't coming home at the time. So it is a better alternative at that time to not. Yeah. I mean, I went through that pain of talking to my daughters who were in that age where they were just meeting boys, and I wasn't there. I wasn't able to be there.
Right. And you really need that bonding before they get into that phase of, oh, mom, or.
Yeah.
Then I went on to explain on that panel where you saw the photograph where I think somebody handed me a tissue. that now, I'm sorry.
No, there are emotions that
No,
make you real.
I envy Kimba, who had a little boy when she was in prison because she got out in time and had another child. And I've seen how her son has grown up and is amazing. He's in fashion, and I see her daughter thriving and the posts. And Danielle has beautiful children that did grow up without her, but now at least she has children. So it's the yin and the yang. When I was in there, oh, thank God I'm not going through this too. I don't know how I could survive it. And then now, when I got out, as I stated in that post, my mom desperately wanted grandchildren. And I was 40 and I said, Mom, I don't have the financial means, and how am I going to find a man if that wants to start a family? And usually you find, in relationships, the woman is usually the younger of the two, as was the case with me. And I did meet somebody who was the next door neighbor to one of my best friends who lived in Malibu. And so he already had a family, and we got married through, I think, 3 years after I got out. And I really thought I had a family. I was very invested. It's a very cohesive family. Always had the big Easter at our home, always did 4th of July, always celebrated Christmas at our home most of the time. And very cohesive with birthday parties and everything like that. And then when my mother was put in home hospice, I had to travel to Arkansas. She didn't have a long-term in-home health insurance. And home hospice now just comes to your home once a day for an hour. So I was her health insurance policy. I'm the only child. My brother's deceased from cancer. And not to get into the particulars because it's too personal, but my husband found a replacement and alienated me from the family. So at 62, here I am with no children and doing a lot of soul searching because I really have no interest in being out in the dating world and stuff like that.
I would not want to be single today. But I tell you, you look 50, not even, you look 45.
That's sweet. But the takeaway here, and I think the message that's so important to not only society, but our leaders in Washington, D.C., is that men and women are not equal. A man can get out of prison, and if he wants to have a child at 70, they can still, have a biological child.
That's right.
And women have a window, and so many women are exempt from motherhood, don't get to experience motherhood. But especially in someone like myself, in the shoes that I'm in now, I don't have a child to care for me as I grow old, and don't have, the loving environment that comes with a family to celebrate holidays with. Of course, I have friends, of course. And I have some cousins, but they're all in Arkansas. So I really want our leaders to take this into consideration. I think judges need to be able to take this into consideration, especially when a woman is being sentenced based on these crazy conspiracy laws where you're held responsible for the actions quite often of a man or your significant other. And that's where we have a lot of work to do to bring some fairness into the sentencing laws.
Well, quite frankly, on the federal side, there's no alternatives to incarceration for women. And these women are not a threat to society.
No. I made that point on the panel. I said, look at Cindy, myself, Danielle, and Kimba. We've all been out for, some of us is, I've been out 20 years. Kimba, same thing. I said, we have done wonderful things. And I even said, we were labeled the worst of society. And I said, in many ways, we're the best of society. We're still giving back. We're still trying to help bring people home. And I didn't mean to put that in the context like best as in, to be bombastic or something like that.
Quite frankly, Amy, you're not giving yourself enough credit. You are. You are not funded by anybody. You don't have grants.
Thank you.
You are. Give yourself some credit, because how long have you been doing this for?
Yeah, 20 years. It's for 2022, 20
really. years. And you've helped so many people not because of money, because of passion.
And it's my heart. And
that's amazing to stay in this space. And I think I said to you before we started recording that it's easy to be in this space for a minute to make some money, get some grants. I can't imagine 20 years. I've been in it 6 years and I'm tired.
I know. We're all going through compassion fatigue. You get burned out. It's funny, the arc, because everybody was kind of loving my work and Can Do until we really helped a lot of people come home during the Obama administration.
Yeah.
And then what started happening was the backlash, because I'm one person. And as you said, I am not funded. I don't take a salary. Nobody can question why I'm in this space, because on Friday, I do not get a paycheck. And so it's, it's really a difficult space and place to be when you're just trying to make a difference. And this monster that we're up against is Hydra headed. If we make progress and cut off one tentacle, it seems like 3 grow back.
Yeah.
And it's a constant. We got the First Step Act passed, which was the basis for my pardon from the Trump administration. And I was proud to work on that and help get it passed. I even got my Congressman Ted Lieu, to change his position. He was going to vote no on it because a lot of the left-wing organizations were against it. In fact, many of us got vilified for going to the Trump White House, but I will work with any administration. My allegiance is to the prisoners, and prisoners over politics. I'm not a political creature. I have normally leaned Democrat left. But when Trump showed signs of a willingness, and Jared Kushner, whose father was in prison, wanted to do prison reform, and I was invited to the White House, of course I went. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't get into the vitriol of who the president is or any.
And in our space, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
People in prison want to come home. And so many people have come home under the First Step Act. So many African-American people have come home under the First Step Act because there was a provision in there to make the crack cocaine victims of 101 ratio, where their sentence was 100 times longer than people who were convicted for powder cocaine. So many of them came home. Yeah. Compassionate release is now a huge thing. So I was very proud to work on the First Step Act, and we'll always continue to do so. There was one other thing I was going to. It was about the women. Oh gosh, and I've kind of lost that thought. Anyway, it may come back to me.
Well, but we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to talk about something that not a lot of people talk about, and may not be favorable in this space for me to talk about, but I think it's important. What I notice in this space is the LGBT community in 1969 came together in unity, Stonewall, right? And they made change. Me Too movement came together in unity and they made change. Black Lives Matter came together in unity and they made change. Why are all of us in the advocacy, criminal justice space not coming together to make change? I don't think a lot of change could be done if we're all, like, you and I don't work on the same things, but together, look how powerful that is, right? You do that. Can you imagine the power of unity? And I don't understand it. And I've been only here 6 years. You've been in the space 20 years. How do you combat that for 20 years? And I'm tired of, that's what I'm tired of. I'm not tired of helping people. I'm exhausted from just my own space trampling on each other. And I don't know how to navigate that at all.
Yeah. It's hard to really explain why there's such a competitive edge so often. And the only thing I can think of is that a lot of the organizations are competing for the same grants. I, again, am not funded, but I might have to enter that space because I am going through a divorce. And I worry, I'm very worried about the not only competitiveness, but the sometimes disrespect and disregard for honoring somebody's work. I'm formerly incarcerated, and I have experienced, a situation where people have, taken credit or marginalized me when they were part of my network and wanted to help somebody that we were championing and was on my website. And instead of coming to me and saying, Amy, we would like to work with you on so-and-so's case that nobody would know about if we weren't pushing them out on social media and sharing their stories. And I've tried, it's called working in a silo, because, I've worked with people and they're part of my network because I've want to work with everybody. And I really also try to foster that energy. And then I find out from the person in prison that, oh, so-and-so just reached into me. And sometimes they'll even say, I have a letter. They said that they found my story on the Can Do website. And I know the person who wrote to them. And I'm like, they want to help me. And I'm like, okay, well, great. And then
you and I both know when you're in prison, you just want to come home.
Yeah.
You want to come home.
Yeah.
In any hope, you want to come home.
Right. And I'm all for that. And I say, look, if anybody can help you, of course, that's great. But when you put exhaustive time and energy into looking into somebody's case, looking up the background facts, vetting them, some of them were elderly. And so then when the First Step Act got passed, there was an elderly release provision. What'll happen is people will start Googling, and we put all our people on the website. And so they'll look to find, oh, this person might qualify for elderly release. Let's reach in to that person. And so they can put them on their website. Well, okay, great. Wonderful. But is there a reason why you can't just reach out to me and we can work together and say, Amy, I've noticed that so-and-so is on your website. Let's work together.
You know what I think too is these grants that are given are so vast and they're so large. So they're given to a lot of the same organizations every year, and they have to spend the money. So what I don't understand is okay, you have to spend the money, but let's do it together because we all have the same goals. I mean, my goal is to help women who are going in, struggling, help their families while they're there, and help them navigate back into society. Your goal is to get them out into society. Someone else's goal may be, policy related. There's so much sentencing. There's so many variables to, someone may do financial crime, drug crime. And if that person who wrote that letter said, let's work together, wow, that inmate would be home. Right?
Right. No, I know. And you would want to think that it would be a welcome effort because a lot of us are friends. And frankly, some of us, even serve time together. And we have to come together when we're up against such a mega force. And I really hope that somehow, I don't know, but it actually takes the heads of the well-funded organizations, and let's face it, some of them are. We're talking millions and millions of dollars.
Yes.
They could micro do some micro grants to some of us grassroots organizations, because you know what, I could clean up with just $20K if I could.
You know what? Let's do that. How do people donate to your organization? Let's get
now. Thank you. Right now, we have a PayPal button on the Kennedy Foundation. We're in the process of building a new website. My website is old and looks like it, but I've got PayPal, and you can certainly reach out to me through the website if you want to donate. And it's a tax deductible donation. So, and that's how we've survived. I've been able to pay for the trips to DC. I can travel based on donations, but I can't pay myself a salary.
Right.
But I have other people. I just have to throw a few names out there, like Malik King, who's our prison outreach coordinator. And, when I go to DC and I wanted him to come this last time, I pay for his airfare, pay for hotel. We had some people come who Adrian Miller, who's a Clemency recipient that we helped. And we use those funds for that purpose. But we need to be able to hire a few people, or we're going to probably end up having to shutter our doors.
Well, I am going to push this for you and try and it's just an amazing thing. I mean, I can't help women in reentry if you don't get them home to me. So, so on the emotional side, we need to get you donations. And then when they come home, I can get donated.
Yeah, thank you.
So right. I don't have to have two other jobs besides the one I'm doing.
I know. Yeah.
And oh my God, I want to have you back because we can just conquer so much. And I really am working on.
I'm proud of you, Jacqueline. It's a huge feather in your cap. I mean, just the fact that you're, Yale, and you're going to be a Yale alumni. I mean, you're going to do incredible things. I feel like a slacker because I still don't have a college degree. And I've been thinking, okay, I've got to do something. I need to get online. But I'm trying to help people. And there's only so many minutes in the day.
No, you don't. You know what? I really believe wholeheartedly a college degree is a piece of paper that gets you, in my situation, I have to have a license, right? And you've learned so much more than you can in any college. So you get the honorary degree from me. The ones behind me, I'll send them to you.
Okay.
You know what? Two of them didn't accept me into their program because I'm a felon. So you can have those.
Okay.
I don't need them. And I don't even know what direction I'm going. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just try and follow my heart. And I love what you're doing. I think it's great. And
Thank you. You're going to be very successful, because when you follow your heart, you get exactly what you deserve, which is many, many blessings.
I hope so, because then it helps the women that we want to help.
Right.
And that's what matters. So.
Right.